that appears to have done it. I do apologise. Yes. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Live Irish Myths. I'm Anthony Murphy. This is episode number 145. You're all very welcome to the Mythical Ireland Library. Tá sé fluch inniu. It is very wet out today. We've had significant heavy showers. Summer is here at last. I love the summer in Ireland. The rain gets warmer. Hope you are all keeping safe and well, no matter where you are around the world. Gather around in safety, in comfort. Grab your dram or your brew, whatever you're having yourself. If you have a pet nearby, put them on your lap. I know we have some pet lovers, some dog lovers, some animal lovers. And for some reason. Okay, I do apologize for the... It's always the same at the beginning. It's like, is it working or is it not? Or am I talking to myself? Anyway, sure, look, you know, would there be any harm? Tonight's subject is Giraldus Cambrensis, otherwise known as Gerald of Wales. He is well known among historians of the Middle Ages, of the period when the Normans were taking over Ireland. I was going to say early, it's kind of the borderline between early medieval and medieval, isn't it? Anyway, let's say hello to a few people before we get started. As I say, I hope you're all keeping well. If the YouTubers are there. Yeah, okay. There. Yes, they are. Right. That's okay. I'm only seeing Facebook comments so far. Good evening to you, Charlene. You're very welcome to the episode. Hope you're well. Steve Martinson is in the house. It's good to see you, Steve. It's cold and wet in western Pennsylvania. Sounds a bit Irish, except for, ironically, now that the rain is here, the temperature has gone up. It was cold when it was sunny. We had a long dry spell. Anyway, that's over. It's to be very showery this week. Apparently, we're going to get a lot of rain. Barbara Barney is in the house. Hello, Barbara. Trust you're keeping well. Good to see you. Lillian Cruz is here from Rio. Hello, Lillian. And I hope you are safe and well. Stacey Herman Lawrence is making us jealous by saying that it's beautiful and sunny in Ohio. Well, send some of it in our direction, please. Although, with sunset not too far away, that mightn't be of any use at this point. Sunshine in the nighttime. Nick Casterton. Yes, it's torrential here, says Nick. It looks like we're sharing the same weather system, Nick. Keep the fingers crossed. That's all I can say. Sue Prenter is watching on YouTube. Good evening, Anthony. Dram in hand, but can't fit 5 dogs on my knee. 5. R2 are a handful. Well, sorry. One of our two is a handful. The other one, Saskia, wouldn't even know she was here most of the time. Daisy Peters is in the house. Wonderful week, Anthony and all Artua. And the same to you, Daisy. The first day of the week. Let's hope it's off to a great start with our episode on Giraldus Cambrensis, the barely pronounceable Gerald of Wales. Mariana Dunn is in sunny Virginia. Well, I'm glad to hear the sun is shining on you, Mariana, and I hope you are well. Shannon Donahue is in Alaska. Hello, Shannon. And it's good morning to you, isn't it? Yeah. You're a good distance around the globe now from us. Robert Friend is saying a friendly Folge, Anthony Adua. Sorry, I won't do that again. I'm sure you've never heard that before. Hello, Robert. Welcome along. Joe Butler's in the house. Hello, Tua. Good to be here from rainy and cool Colorado. We're kind of not quite the opposite, rainy and sort of muggy. Bit of lightning around today. Not too close by, thankfully. Matthew Bessel says, Gay Kels salute yous, man in your drone magic graw. Yes, indeed. What a week. What a couple of weeks. It's been an interesting time. Alan Taff is in the house and says, hello, Giaguch, Alan Folge. Barb Jordan is also here. Long-running watcher, viewer of the series, of the live streams. Movanwe is saying that, sorry, I've missed so many weeks. I've got a lot to catch up on. Looking forward to tonight's episode. Yes, that's the great thing about having them archived is that, of course, if you miss one, you can still see it, you know. And I still, it's a funny thing, but after the streams are finished, I'll still get people commenting, hello from Colorado, hello from, London, hello from, Dublin. And it's great to see it. Donna Ferrer is here. She's in Maryland. So glad to be here live. Well, Donna, we're glad to have you in the house. The library, more specifically. Maureen O'Leary says that it's a bright, sunny day in northwest Minnesota. You're coming through loud and clear. That's a big 5-9. Roger, Roger. Thank you for that, Maureen. That's all QSL. Anne McCallum is in the house. Greetings. Hope everyone is well. After beginning its journey in March, my beautiful copy of Return to Segish finally arrived safely just 20 minutes before showtime today. Brilliant. Yay, I was beginning to think it had either hitched a ride in one of those ancient logboats or had decided literally to return to Segish. It's a funny thing, isn't it, that my latest 2 books are about the Boyne. Yeah, Return to Segish and the monograph about Finn McCool. That's fascinating. That took a bit of time to get to you, Anne. But anyway, it's there. That's the important thing. And I hope you enjoy it greatly, as I'm sure you will. John McNulty says, hello, everyone. Fáilte, John. Good evening to you. Welcome along. Helen Hirsch Shatter says that it is overcast in South Dakota. Well, copy and paste, because we are grayed out here. And in fairness, we're just being reminded what a normal summer is like. We have had a very good spell of weather in terms of nice, bright, dry weather. John Main is in the house. Bannocky, everyone, hope that you're doing well. Looking forward to an interesting and informative discussion. Well, I hope you get it here, John. We'll do our best. And good evening to you. Peter Woods is in the house, and he's only literally, from the top story of the house, if I look through a gap in the house opposite, I can see Monaster Boyce. You're only up the road. It's growing weather at last, says Peter. That's true. The farmers will be relieved. Margaret Kiernan says, good evening. Hope I long for Ibiza and a cocktail. I think there are a lot of people waiting for the green light so they can go and travel abroad. So you're probably in a long queue there, Margaret. Tom Byrne is in Limerick. Good evening to you, Tom. Tranonawa Conas Atá too. Dolmac McDermott says, hi, Anthony August Antua. Congratulations on your fabulous finds on the boil. Slight typo there, but it's probably an autocorrect, I reckon. Yes, indeed. Thank you, Dolmac. It's been great fun. Desiree Riley, otherwise known as Desiree Riley, is in the house. Hello, Anthony Antua. I hope everyone's well. I'll be listening in while driving to New Orleans, so I won't be able to cut up with everyone in the chat, but I'll definitely be listening. Brilliant stuff. Desiree, well, drive safely and get there safely. I hope that you're in good form. Virginia M. Regan Hawkins is in sunny, is it Encinitas? Is that how you pronounce that? In California. Send some of that California sunshine over to Ireland. Tom Byrne says he loves the show. Thank you, Tom. Great to see you. Hope you're well. And thank you for your nice comment. Brendan Byrne says that I always look forward to the first call of the cuckoo in Glendalough, and today was the day. But where is summer, please? Yeah, I'm afraid. I can't do much for you there, Brendan. As you know, all we can do is put out the Lady of Prague. Is that what you call her? The doll. Charlene McLean Cosby says it's warm and sunny in coastal. Oh, sorry, Merritt. One moment. It's warm and sunny in coastal North Carolina. Sounds lovely. Send some of it this direction, please. Merritt Braun is in Switzerland. Good evening, Merritt. Hello to you. Fiona Newman is in Ontario, in Canada. Hello, Fiona. Welcome to the live stream. Gary, who is the full Irish GK, says Giagich August Gias Muragwich a Garoj Conastatu Makara. And how are things in Ballia? Nicholas O'Foylon says Conastashiv Tasulagum Gawulshiv Guma O Gaeltacht Anrin. Well, I'm glad that you probably have a lot more Irish than I have, Nicholas, but what I have gets me by for the greetings. And yes, you think that we're all well, and I think that seems to be the vibe, definitely. Adina Sparks is in the house. Hello, Adina. as is Sue Morrish, who says it's a lovely spring evening in London. Again, send some of it in this direction. We'll take it from all directions. Someone is on the Mythical Ireland community. I do apologise. I don't see those comments, and that annoys me. I returned from a long absence. Great to be here. And I'll tell you who that is momentarily. That is Paul Garrett. None other than Paul. It's great to see you. And you're always welcome. And don't worry about the absence. You know, life gets in the way. That's what happens. But don't forget, you can catch up on them all, which is great. But it's good to see you. Mariana Dimitrova, I am breathtaken by what you do. Nice comment. Thank you, Mariana. That's lovely for you to say so, and it heartens me greatly, and it makes me want to keep going. So thank you for your support. Neil Hughes and Mary are in chilly Coatbridge, Scotland, and the usual Fiam Jarrag August Tay. The red wine and tea are already in the Hughes household, which is great. Anne Scott Doherty is in Grants Pass in Oregon, soon to be tuning in from Ennistimon in County Clare. Oh, brilliant. Are you moving? Is that a holiday or is that a permanent thing, Anne? But it doesn't matter. It'll be great to have you along. I suppose it'll be, from your point of view, handier to be in the same time zone. The Curious Celt is in the house. I didn't see you there, I don't think. I apologise. Deer Park up on Cox's Land. Who is that? That's Pádraig O'Comasky, who is in Dundalk. Lots of thunder and lightning today. Well, all I can say, Pádraig, is I'm glad you guys kept the thunder and lightning in the north of the county and kept it away from the Droghedians in the south. It's good to see you. I hope you're well. Donna says maybe the Smithsonian Air and Space Institute connected with the Smithsonian would like to have the drone in its collection. Oh, you're talking about the Phantom 3 Advance, the discoverer of drone henge. Yeah, there's an idea. Would look a little bit odd if I suggested it to them, wouldn't it? Jennifer Harned says hello from Idaho. May all be well with you. I guess Trononawat, Jennifer Giagwich, you're very welcome along. Mandy McCurl says rubbish broadband here tonight. That must be the weather. That can be the case. Alan is saying hello from Ballina, Killaloe, which are two little towns on opposite sides of the River Shannon. And they're I love the way they're considered to be one town, you know. Like once upon a time, Drogheda was two separate towns, and never the twain shall meet. And that continues today with this whole idea of the Farsiders. Laura Inky Fingers is in Alberta in Canada. Good evening, Laura. And Inky Fingers sounds good. Sounds like you're an artist or a creative of some kind. Hope you've been busy writing or creating. Chris Morgan says he's looking forward to this. I'm in Vancouver, Washington. Not to be confused with Vancouver in Canada. I grew up, but although it's still on the west, isn't it? I grew up hearing stories about the gentlefolk and all. Love to learn about my heritage. Appreciate the opportunity. Brilliant stuff, Chris. Well, we hope you learn and that you enjoy yourself while doing so, as I'm sure you will. Virginia says, good try. Nora Gaffney O'Connor has joined us. Jiggy Golair, you're on my telly. I'm using Chromecast. You're coming in loud and clear. That's a 10-4, rubber duck. Yes. Back in the CB days, huh? How do I pronounce that? Shit, is it? Seve Estelle Hilton says, love a good grey day. Not many do. Bit of cloud cover here in Maine. Yeah, I suppose it's true. Kind of makes things a little bit darker and duller. Life is nice when it's bright. Ahmed Oda says, good evening, everyone. Fáilte, Ahmed, you're very welcome along to Live Irish Myths. Hope you enjoy the show. Marianne Kinja says that it's great to be here. It's great to have you here, Marianne. Child of Prague is a statue. Yes, indeed. Thank you, Margaret. Deb, part 4, says, think you may have hit mute. Really? Anybody else not hearing me? It's probably a good thing. Let's be honest. Wouldn't it be funny if you had to lip read the whole episode? Laura Orr is in Alberta in Canada. Hello, Laura, and always a delight to see the Canadians in the house, and there are so many of them. Susan Long is in the house also. Hello, Susan. Welcome to you. Hope you're well. Nick had his second vaccine. Brilliant stuff, Nick. Never been so happy to receive an injection. Brilliant stuff. And I hope that it gives you a little bit more freedom soon enough. Saoirse Ní Cheandáil is here. Chadé Maratashiv. Awesome about the logboats and all. Remember, Rident stolidi verba Latina. You'll have to translate that for me, Saoirse. I'm terribly sorry to report that my Latin is only marginally worse than my Irish. Mary McGee is in Dunglow and says, not the Mary, just one of many. Well, you're the Mary for us, Mary. If you're in the Tua and you're watching Live Irish Myths, you are the Mary. Marcus O'Rourke is in Athlone saying hi in the middle of the country. Well, not a million miles away from Ishnock. Good evening to you from lovely Athlone on the Shannon. Chris Morgan says, well, Oregon, Idaho, and Washington are here, plus N in Canada. Right on. By the way, I'm a girl. Lol. Oh, that's such a difficult thing, isn't it? You know, it's like getting that wrong. It's just, I'm going to punish myself. I'm going to have to go offline now and give out to myself for a while. Grace Walker's in the house. Hello, Grace. Sandra Boothroyd is there. Helena Breen is there. Karen Gogus is in. Oh, I keep going to click and they keep moving. Kerem is in the house. Hello, Kerem. Kerem, our wonderful 3D artist. Saoirse says the translation of that means it means fools laugh at the Latin language. I'm sure they do. Patricia Wardell says, ciao, ciao from Trieste. Love these evenings. Hello, Patricia. Oh, brilliant. Selkie, is it Selkie Woman? Says, it's been far too long. Well, a week is long enough these days. Ria Uleri is in the house. Hello, Ria. Folche. Erica Rivertree joins us from Louisville in Kentucky. Hello to you. There are no announcements this evening. You know, apart from the usual, you know, if you want to donate to the live stream, that's the PayPal address. If you want to make a once-off donation to support the live streams, paypal.me/Mythical Ireland. And as usual, I'll always say, look, if you want to become a patron, support the work of Mythical Ireland and get rewarded for doing so. And depending on the level of patronage, you get more rewards. So there you go. At the moment, for Bronze Age patrons and above, is that 75-minute interview with Morgan Llewellyn, the famous author, about her work, a lot of which was inspired by Irish mythology and history. So get over to Patreon. The advertisements will be over momentarily. Patreon.com/Mythical Ireland. And, you know, yeah, become a patron. Cheers. Paste that in, and then we'll get on with it. And so tonight, what time are we on? 1840. Let's call it 19. Tonight, we are talking about Giraldus Cambrensis, otherwise known as Gerald of Wales. And you're probably wondering, what sort of tangent are we going off on with this, you know? Now, if you're reasonably familiar with, you know, medieval Irish history, you'll have heard his name, undoubtedly. If you're not, then it may take a little bit of explaining. Shannon, thank you for your comment. Shannon, who is a Mythical Ireland patron, watched the Morgan Llewellyn interview last night. It was fantastic. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And I hope at some point to be able to get another chat with her, because she was just so sharp and so interesting and engaged, you know. She really was. Erica Bow is here, apparently. I didn't see that. Ah, there you go. Hello, Erica. Oh, we have the two Ericas. Erica Rivertree and Erica Bow are both here. We're having a reunion of sorts. This is brilliant. Breeny says, glad you're on board, Patricia Wardell. This guy is mentioned in Ulysses. I missed that. What's that about Ulysses? As in James Joyce's Ulysses. Kerem reports that he's on YouTube because Facebook was glitchy. Well, that's one of the advantages of streaming on both at the same time. Okay, so after 20 minutes, we should press on with the show. So, who is Giraldus Cambrensis? Well, his name comes up quite often when you're reading about medieval Irish history, especially in conjunction with the Norman conquest of Ireland. And especially in texts dealing with what we might call ancient practices. He's mentioned in lots of texts dealing with mythology too. And that's because he seems to have preserved for us some indication of ancient practices before his time. And his time was the 12th century, but we'll get to that in a moment. Donna Jean Porter says, my Irish were already here when the Normans came, an old clan, O'Guffin. I think that's pronounced O'Guffin, isn't it? Brilliant, Donna. And apparently Murphy, which means sea warrior, apparently the Murphys trace their lineage back to Erimone, the first of the Milesian kings. So, don't know. One viewer, am I in the wrong place? Who's that? You're not in the wrong place. I'm streaming also on Anthony Murphy photography page just because Melon app allows me to stream on 3 separate Facebook pages at one time. Blogger 2 says, many congratulations, major congratulations. Have you plans to discuss the new discovery anytime soon? Yes, indeed. In fact, I'm hoping to do a special episode on that. So definitely watch this space. That story is kind of progressing as more research is done. Sea Warrior, great name, yeah. Well, sure, the Milesians were like the Spanish Armada, weren't they? Jackie Stevenson is in the house. Far too long since I've joined live due to work. Totally miss the talks. Well, don't worry, Jackie, we're glad to see you. And yeah, all you can do is be here whenever you can, isn't it? That's all you can do. Giraldus Cambrensis was basically a historian and a topographer. Is that a word? Somebody who writes about the topography of Ireland. He arrived here. He was a member of one of the most important Norman families of Wales at the time. The story of the Norman conquest is interesting. In a nutshell, a king of Ireland, one of the kings, Dermot MacMurrough, had lost a battle and had to leave Ireland and was a little bit peed off, you know? And he went over to Wales and he said to a couple of lads there who happened to be of Norman descent, I think the Earl of Pembroke might have been one of them. Forgive me if I'm making mistakes. I'm summarizing this as briefly as I can. And he said, listen, if you come over to Ireland and help me beat these beggars, these, if you don't mind me saying, using an Irish word, these feckers, if you don't mind me, if you come over to Ireland and help me beat these feckers, I'll give you my daughter's hand in marriage. And the rest, as they say, is history. In 1169, Richard de Clare, known as Strongbow, and several, I'm not sure if you call them battalions, I don't know what the historical term is. The Normans arrived over anyway with some knights and fighting people. Army. How desperately ridiculous is that? I'm sorry, I sound like a blathering primary school student. And there was a defeat, and while they were there, they said, sure, let's kill some more people and capture some land and all the rest. And soon the king got involved. I think he was Henry II initially, was the king at the time. And, he was giving some of the Normans lands as well as a reward for their conquest. Giraldus's role is basically that of a historian / propagandist. Because as we're always saying on this show, history is written by the victor, and history is tainted, and history is one-sided. For a greater truth of the history of a people, as we've often said, you probably need to consider mythology as being a more accurate account of them. Giraldus wrote his famous book, which is called Topographia Hiberniae, and it's an account of his travels. And some very interesting things he talks about, the land and the appearance of the place, and he talks about animals, the flora and fauna and all that, and the geography, etc., etc. But then he gets on to talking about, people and some of the weird things that they do. So his reports or his accounts are somewhat tainted by the fact that he was he was doing a job, he was doing a service as part of the conquest. And as is typical of these sort of imperial conquests, the main job is always to arrive in a new land, new to them, new to the conquestors, not to the people who live there, to paint the inhabitants as savages, ignoramuses, and to say, well, it's a bloody well good job we came along, because we are going to put manners on them, we're going to civilize them, and we are going to give them civilization. But that's the propagandist's twist on things. And in the 1160s began what made, I think, by all accounts, has turned out to be the most turbulent period in Irish history, and it's been a long 8 centuries, and remembered very bitterly by some people. But anyway, we're not going to harp on about that just at the moment. I'm going to give you an introduction to Gerald, and then we're going to pick out some interesting snippets from what he wrote, and let's see if we can determine whether, let's examine the veracity of them, and see if we can make out whether, some of it's SH1T, or whether there may be some truth in it. Archaeoastronomy database is here. No problem at all. There's a few people having problems with technology, which we are putting down to the weather. I know there's no connection, but there you go. Gerald of Wales, also known as Gerald de Barry or Giraldus Cambrensis, was born in 1146 and died in 1223. I will get my reading glasses because age starts to do these things on one. Historian of the Anglo-Norman invasion. Born at Manorbier in Pembrokeshire, Gerald, I don't know if that's the correct pronunciation, perhaps some of the Welsh folk could slap me around the place and tell me I'm wrong. Gerald was a younger son of William de Barry de Angarad, granddaughter of Rhys ap Tudor, Tewdyor, Movanwe, please help me with that one, King of South Wales. He was educated as a cleric at St. Peter's Abbey, Gloucester, and Paris University. Wow. Must have been something in the 12th century to be able to travel to Paris to university. Paul Campbell, thank you for that. Paul, always very good of you to remind us of that this can be shared. Yes, indeed. Thank you. He was appointed Archdeacon of Brecon circa 1175, and this was the title which he used of himself. About 1182, he visited Ireland, where many of his Cambro-Norman relatives had acquired lands. He returned in 1185 in the train of John, son of Henry II, and remained for a period after John's departure. He's talking about there, obviously, King John. In 1186, he preached at a provincial synod at Dublin, severely criticising the Irish clergy. And that's interesting because that comes in the wake of the two major synods of the 12th century, the church reforming synods of Rathbrassel and Kells Mellifont. Severely criticising the Irish clergy. So here he goes. He's straight out of the traps and he's given out about the Irish. While in Ireland, he claimed to have been offered the bishoprics of Wexford and Leyland, and somewhat later, Ossory, and the Archdiocese of Cashel, all of which he declined. To his 2 Irish journeys are owed his Topography of Ireland, published in 1188, which was dedicated to Henry II, and his Expugnatio Hibernica, which I believe means the conquest of Ireland, which appeared shortly thereafter. Both works were written with a strong polemical purpose to justify Anglo-Norman intervention in Ireland. He was highly critical of the Irish, portraying them as barbarians and barely Christian. He extolled the bravery of his relatives, the Geraldines, at the expense of other early adventurers such as Strongbow, the aforementioned Richard de Clare, and argued that they were harassed unjustly by royal officials. He outlined strategies for completing the conquest of Ireland, which he hoped to persuade King Henry and later Richard I to implement in Ireland. His work inaugurating the colonial historiographical tradition of a negative portrayal of the Irish was to be relied on heavily by subsequent Anglo-Irish and English writers, and stimulated, this is very important, and stimulated an apologetic response from native authors. Although Geoffrey Keating's Foras Fassa ar Éireann, for example, devoted considerable attention to refuting Gerald's portrayal of the Irish. So the thing is, get your attack in first, propagandize, say as much bad things as you can about the Irish, make them out to be ignorant savages, and then you can justify your conquest and you can say, well, before we came, the Irish were just pig-ignorant, drunk fighters. And now they have civilization. Look what we have given them. Aren't we wonderful? One of the words I used earlier on in my brief description to advertise the stream was a rapscallion, a mischievous person. Yes, I think there was lots of mischief going on. Definitely. Let us hear what, in one paragraph, this is short and sweet, let us hear what our good friend Bob Quinn, who was on Live Irish Myths in Conversation some time ago, in his book, The Atlantean Irish, talks or says about Giraldus Cambrensis. He was talking about the 6th century Anglo-Irish poet Edmund Spenser, who wrote, quote, "It is certain that Ireland had the use of letters very anciently and long before England," unquote. Something, by the way, conveniently possibly forgotten by the Norman propagandist Giraldus Cambrensis. But for obvious political reasons, Spenser was impatient with claims that the Irish were related to the Spanish. Quote, "Oh, of all the nations under heaven, the Spaniard is the most mingled and most uncertain, whereof most foolishly do the Irish think to ennoble themselves by wresting their ancestry from the Spaniards," unquote. And here is Bob in with all guns blazing. If Spenser had read that marvellous libel, Topographica Hibernia, by a Welsh cleric named Giraldus Cambrensis, he might have torn his beard out. Cambrensis purveyed his account of the Irish in the 12th century. He was a churchman who accompanied the early Norman invaders, essentially a war correspondent with special privileges. He was given access to all available literary sources, but even if he had quoted accurately from them, he would still have been in trouble. As Owen MacNeill pointed out, the 10th and 11th centuries produced a school of Irish historians whose chief work was to reduce the old miscellaneous matter of tradition to unity and sequence. In dealing with the pre-Christian period, they tampered with tradition in two ways. When they found definite elements of heathenism, they either cut these out or furbished them in a guise which they considered consonant with Christian belief. This can be shown to have been done consciously and deliberately. Yes, so a war correspondent with special privileges. Thank you, Bob. One of our friends here on Live Irish Myths. And I'm going to be reading a little bit tonight from Gerald of Wales, The History and Topography of Ireland, which is a Penguin classic. It only runs to, 136 pages, and I can't remember how much it cost, but easily available online, I'm sure, if you want to get a copy. And by the way, that graphic for the episode does not show Giraldus, but rather that is a depiction of St. Kevin of Glendalough in Cambrensis' Topographica. Is it Topographia or Topographica? Topographia Hiberniae. Giraldus de Barry called Cambrensis from Cambria, Wales, the country of his birth, was born at the castle of Manorbier in Pembrokeshire around 1146. His father was... Yes, let's cut it. Let's not repeat stuff here. Through her marriage with Gerald de Windsor, Castellan of Pembroke, Nest, who is... his mother was Angahar, daughter of Nest. Nest had become the mother of the first members of the illustrious and powerful Norman family of the Fitzgeralds. So there you go. If you hear a surname in Ireland that begins with Fitz, they're nearly all Norman, except for, they reckon, was it the Fitzpatricks? They reckon we're here before the Normans. But then the rest, the Fitzgeralds, the Fitzmaurices, etc., they're all apparently Norman descendants. Among her other children were David Fitzgerald, later Bishop of St. David's, and Maurice Fitzgerald, one of the principal leaders of the Norman invasion of Ireland. Here I describe no more of Giraldus's life and works than will provide a brief context. Yeah, okay, this is a quite lengthy introduction, so let's not read the whole lot. To the Topography of Ireland, as Brewer says, we are indebted, quote, we are indebted for all that is known of the state of Ireland during the whole of the Middle Ages. A few barren chronicles excepted, unquote. And I think what he's talking about there is the fact that the annals, while they do record the rise and fall of kings and clerics, abbots, and, you know, the occasional plague and the occasional eclipse and astronomical occurrence, they don't provide a very comprehensive account of history. They're very terse in their descriptions. Its great importance may also be seen from the remarks of a more interested writer, Geoffrey Keating, who says, every one of the new Gauls who writes on Ireland writes in imitation of Cambrensis, because it is Cambrensis who is as the bull of the herd for them, for writing the false history of Ireland. Wherefore they had no choice of guide. And that's from Keating's History of Ireland, Volume 1. We may be pardoned then if we say something on how the book was composed. Let's just say that Cambrensis is his reputation is mixed, to say the very least. There's a fairly major contradiction. On the one hand, he paints the Irish as savages and is clearly performing a service of propaganda on behalf of invaders. On the other hand, he actually probably did genuinely chronicle events and, as I say, habits and customs and topography and geography of the time that might otherwise have been lost to time. So very much a two-sided sword, as it were, or a two-headed coin. Giraldus came to Ireland in 1183 for the first time. He helped his uncle and his brother by his counsel and diligently explored the site and nature of the island and primitive origin of its race. And he came back again in 1185 at Waterford. This time he had been dispatched by King Henry II, who had sent his youngest son John to Ireland with a great force. And with him he sent Master Giraldus, because he had a great number of kinsmen in Ireland who had been among the first conquerors of that race, and also because he was a, quote, honest and prudent man, unquote. More propaganda, huh? After John's return to Wales and England in December of the same year, Giraldus was left with Bertrand of Verdun, the Seneschal of Ireland, to be his comrade and the witness of his deeds, and remained in the island to the following Easter that he might pursue his studies more fully, etc., etc. From this testimony, the internal evidence of the topography of Ireland and the known activities of the invaders, we can come to a fair idea of the extent of his travelling in and knowledge of Ireland. This is important in view of his confident and uncomplimentary assertions on many points. We have no proof that he went outside the neighbourhoods of Cork and Waterford on the occasion of his first visit. On the second occasion, when he came over with John, he travelled from Waterford to Dublin. And that's basically a journey up the coast of the eastern side of the country, from the southeast to the east. He can scarcely have gone by an inland route, for he would hardly have written, quote, on the whole, the land is low-lying on all sides and along the coast, but further inland it rises up very high to many hills and even high mountains. He may have journeyed by the coast or even taken ship. He does seem, however, to have some knowledge of Arklow and Wicklow. We know, too, that he passed through Meath and was in Kildare. He may have seen the Shannon near Athlone, with Loch Ree, perhaps also Loch Derg. That is all we can reasonably conclude. The rest of the country was probably unvisited by him, as most of it was up to that time by his fellow Normans. So let's hear what he says about the fertility of Ireland at the time. And remember, this is the late 1100s. This is the 12th century AD. I hope everybody's sitting comfortably and enjoying yourself. So far, Natty Lopez is watching on YouTube. Good evening to you. Pardon me. Catherine Woodruff is here. Hello, Catherine. Welcome along. Kathy May is on a lunch break where it's sunny in Washington State. Very nice. May the sun shine on you all day long. Tudor. Sounds a bit like Tudor, doesn't it, Movanway? Sorry, we're catching up on pronunciations from earlier. The land is fruitful. This is Giraldus writing in his History and Topography of Ireland. The land is fruitful and rich in its fertile soil and plentiful harvests. Well, some things haven't changed. Crops abound in the fields, flocks on the mountains, and wild animals in the woods. Quite a lot of the forests of Ireland that would have been extant then, of course, have disappeared in the meantime. The island is, however, richer in pastures than in crops, and in grass than in grain, and that still remains to be the case in modern day agricultural Ireland. Yes, it's the Welsh version of Tudor, says Movanway. Okay, brilliant. Right, so I'm glad I didn't make a complete show of myself that time. The crops give great promise in the blade, even more in the straw, but less in the ear. So far, he seems to be on fairly safe territory. He doesn't seem to be telling any great lies. For here the grains of wheat are shriveled and small and can scarcely be separated from the chaff by any winnowing fan. Excuse me. All I'd say in that regard is that, you know, there are so many varieties of wheat these days that is unlikely to be still the case. The plains are well clothed with grass, and the haggards are bursting with straw. Only the granaries are without their wealth. What is born and comes forth in the spring and is nourished in the summer and advanced can scarcely be reaped in the harvest because of unceasing rain. Yet again, we can't say that that's propaganda, notwithstanding that we've had, as I said, we've had a spring drought this year, we had a spring drought last year, we had a summer drought in 2018. These are unusual occurrences. Mostly Ireland's a very wet place, you know, which is why it's so lush and green, 40 shades of green and all that. For this country, more than any other, suffers from storms of wind and rain. Well, again, no propaganda there. A northwest wind, along with the west wind to its south, prevails here and is more frequent and violent than any other. It bends in the opposite direction almost all the trees in the west that are placed in an elevated position or uproots them. Again, still spot on. In fact, any of you who have ventured out to the west, you'll see in parts of Connemara, coastal Connemara, and in Clare and down into, you know, coastal Kerry and Cork, you'll see trees that are literally sort of bent with the wind, you know. Even telegraph poles. The island is rich in pastures and meadows, honey and milk and wine, but not vineyards. Again, still true to this day. Bede, and that's the Venerable Bede, who was a historian. However, among his other praises of the island, says that it is not altogether without vineyards. On the other hand, Solinus says that it has no bees. Well, that's not true now, definitely. But if I may be pardoned by both, it would have been more true if each of them had said the opposite. It has no vineyards, and it is not altogether without bees. For the island has not and never had vines and their cultivators. Imported wines, however, conveyed in the ordinary commercial way, are so abundant that you could scarcely notice that the vine was neither cultivated nor gave its fruit there. Again, I'm not sure about the veracity of that statement at the time he was writing, but I'll tell you what, there's plenty of off licenses well stocked with wine in the supermarkets today. Yes, indeed. Poitou, out of its own superabundance, sends plenty of wine. Okay, blah, blah, blah. Neither would it be strange if these authors sometimes strayed from the path of truth. He's talking about Bede and Solinus. Well, he could be talking about himself. The 9 principal rivers and many others that have recently emerged. The island is divided and watered by 9 principal and magnificent rivers, which have been famous from the earliest time of the earliest inhabitants of the land after the flood. That is Bartholanos. And he spells that with a B, and of course that's Partholon, from the Lower Gawala, the Partholon, well, the Partholonians, Partholon and his people, but they weren't the first arrivals, of course, because Kildare arrived with Fintan and the gang. Their names are Avon Lifus, which is basically Avon, I reckon, is like a Latinized form of Avon, which means river. Not an Irish word, of course. Liffeus, which is for the Liffey, through Dublin. Banna through Ulster, and that's the Ban. Of course, that's definitely true. Modus through Connacht. Slickius and Semirus through Kinnail Connell, which is the Kinnail Connell were a branch of the Ainail kings, but I can't remember what territory. They're sort of Kinnail Noganacht, or the northern Ainail, the southern Ainail. Modernus and Finis through Kinnellonia, and Saverinus and Luvius through Cork. So these are what look like sort of some Latinized names. Very disappointingly, the Boyne River is not there. There are many other rivers flowing through Ireland which are, so to speak, new, and with regard to the ones mentioned, only recently emerged. They are not, however, smaller than the former, and only on the point of antiquity are they inferior. And this is a thing that was kind of very commonplace in the early accounts, the mythological accounts, in the Denchanicus, for instance, and in the Book of Invasions, among others, the bursting forth of lakes and rivers, as if they were just suddenly formed overnight. And this obviously became a belief, but of course, the geographers and geologists and anybody who studies these things now knows that that's unlikely to be true. Some of them spring from the bowels of the earth and from the veins of wells. That's true too. The Boyne, of course, said to have its origin at Segish. Others arise suddenly from lakes. All of them are fine rivers and divide and separate the island into its sections with their long courses. I have thought it useful to say something about some of these. From underneath the foot of the mountain Blama, which is Slieve Bloom, should I say, 3 large rivers spring. They're called the Three Sisters because they have shared between them the names of 3 sisters, namely Burva, which flows through Leylin, Oirus through Ossory, and Shurius through Ardfinnan and Tibrachia to join the sea at Waterford. And of course, they are known today as the Barrow, the Nore, and the Shure. And they're still called the Three Sisters 8 centuries later, more than 8 centuries later. The Slania flows through Wexford, that's the Slaney. The Boandus through Meath, that's the Boyne. But it's not considered one of the 9 principal rivers, according to Giraldus's account. And the Avonmorus through Lismore, Avonmore literally meaning the big river, and the Synonus through Limerick, that's the Shannon. Can't believe that the Shannon and the Boyne, the Shannon especially being the largest physical river in Ireland, isn't considered one of the major ones, and that the Boyne, which would be, I suppose, the principal mythological river, is not considered. Let me just have a quick look to see if I'm missing anybody who's joined the conversation. Maggot AJ is there. I didn't see you. So hello to you and good evening. The Shannon rightly holds the chief place among all the rivers of Ireland, whether old or new, both on the account of the magnificence of its size, its long meandering, and its abundance of fish. Hang on. Am I sinning? Did I miss something? Yeah. So it wasn't mentioned among the 9 principal and magnificent rivers, but now he's describing it as that it has its chief place among all the rivers of Ireland. That's confusing. Its long meanderings and its abundance of fish. It rises in a certain large and beautiful lake that divides Connacht from Munster and sends 2 arms, so to speak, in opposite directions of the world. One arm goes south, flows beside Killaloe. There you go. If I can remember, I can. It's on the tip of my tongue. The gentleman who watches from Ballina, Killaloe, whose name immediately escapes me, of course, just when I need it. It'll come back to me in a moment. Takes in Limerick and, separating the 2 Munsters from one another at a distance of 100 miles and more, pours itself out into the Brendanican Sea. I presume that's the Atlantic, and named from St. Brendan the Voyager. The other arm of equal importance separates Meath and the farther parts of Ulster from Connacht, and after many wanderings eventually joins the Northern Sea. And this is from the popular belief that the Boyne and the Shannon share the same source, which they do mythologically, but geographically they don't. It therefore separates the fourth and western part of the island from the other three. It runs between them and marks Connacht off from sea to sea. If of old the country was divided into 5 almost equal parts, that's true, namely 2 Munsters, north and south, Leinster, Ulster and Connacht. The prophecy of Merlin predicted that they would all be reduced to 1, but we shall say more about this when we come to treat of it. Merlin. Yes, Merlin, what business do you have prophesying about the future geopolitical divisions of Ireland? There you go. This country, above all others that we have seen, is well supplied with beautiful lakes full of fish and very large. They're a kind of speciality here. Yes. They contain islands rising to some height and very beautiful. The lords of the land usually appropriate them as places of safety and refuge, as well as of habitation. That's the islands he's talking about. They are inaccessible except to boats. And if we're talking about medieval times, we are talking about dugout boats. Yeah. Anybody know anything about dugout boats? Maybe I should send the drone up over a few of the lakes. Yes, the sea coasts on all sides abound sufficiently with sea fish. The rivers, however, and the lakes are rich in fish peculiar to themselves, and especially in fish of 3 kinds, namely salmon, trout, and mud eels. Funnily enough, it is maintained, our good friend Professor J.P. Mallory, in his book The Origins of the Irish, talks about the staple foods of the Mesolithic, pre-Neolithic. So before the time when cattle and horses and sheep were introduced into Ireland, if you were the sort of person in the Mesolithic who was hungry for meat, meat came to you only really from the wild boar, and then from the fish. And the 3 main fish of the Mesolithic were the salmon, the trout, and the eels. The salmon abounds in sea lampreys. They serve as luxuries for the rich. But some fine fish found in other regions and some magnificent freshwater fish are wanting. I mean pike, perch, roach, garden, and gudgeon. Minnow, loach, bullheads, varones, and nearly all that do not have their seminal origin in tidal rivers are absent also. That's a strange one, because I know, like, modern day anglers would say no, there's plenty of pike and perch in Irish rivers, and I'm not sure about the rest. Some birds that live on the water and build their nests in high places are found here as elsewhere, but other types of birds have been altogether wanting even from the earliest times. So in the briefest of accounts, he's basically saying that Ireland has similar birds to what he might have seen in his homeland, but doesn't seem to have anything too, exotic. Alan Hoskins. Yes, it came to me eventually. See the way the brain was working away there while I was chatting. Alan Hoskins is on the Shannon there at Ballina-Killaloe. The hawk, falcon, and sparrowhawk and their nature. This country above any other produces hawks, falcons, and sparrowhawks abundantly. These birds have been provided by nature with courageous hearts, curved and sharp beaks, and feet armed with talons most suitable for catching their prey, and all to afford amusement to the nobles. There is one remarkable thing about these birds, and that is that no more of them build nests now than there did many generations ago. And although their offspring increases every year, nevertheless, the number of nest builders does not increase. But if one pair of birds is destroyed, another takes its place. The nests do not increase in number for a variety of reasons. No reason, however, tends to their increase. Cassiodorus tells us, birds of this kind, quote, that live by prey throw their weak young offspring out of their nests, lest they should accustom themselves to soft living, and beat them with their wings and compel their young chicks to fly, so that they may turn out to be such that their parents can depend upon them, unquote. When, as time goes on, their wings have got some strength, they are trained with the help of nature to prey, and are brought from their homes and compelled by their faithless parents to remain away forever, etc., etc. Now let's go forward, because I want to talk about some of the mythological. This is an interesting one. Swans. Good day. I am enjoying reading Finn and the Salmon. Brilliant stuff, Mark. Don't forget, if you're interested in acquiring a copy of the monograph, Finn and the Salmon of Knowledge, Mythology, Toponymy, Cosmology, visit the Mythical Ireland website at mythicalireland.com and go into the shop and gallery and go into the books section, where you will also be able to, if you're really, really interested, grab yourself a copy of Return to Segish. Thank you. Here's the advertising again. Swans, that's my fault, Mark, not yours, don't worry. Betsy Packard says, I'm an MFA candidate in poetry at the University of Kentucky. My thesis project, 45 poems, is inspired by women in myths. Brilliant. You may enjoy monograph number 2 when it's published, Betsy, because it's going to be about Boann, the goddess who gives her name to the Boyne River. Swans are very plentiful in the northern part of Ireland. Sorry, I must just close that down. That actually is kind of true, because the whooper swans arrive in large numbers in the wintertime in October. Sometimes 10, 15, 20,000 birds, and disperse to their various wintering grounds around the country. Storks are very seldom seen anywhere in Ireland, and when they are black. There is a remarkable thing about swans. They teach us that the troubles of death should not grieve us. Coda is he paws his empty water bowl when it's empty, and makes lots of noise, and basically to draw your attention to the fact that, hey, listen, I'm thirsty and there's no water in my bowl. Will you guys ever get up off your lazy backsides and put some in it? They teach us that the troubles of death should not grieve us, for in the very moment of dying, they make a virtue of necessity and despise their sad fate in singing. So men, clothed in the white garments of virtue, depart joyfully from the hardships of this world. They thirst only for God, the living fountain, and desire to be freed and liberated from the body of this death and to be with Christ. And this is interesting because obviously it's written from a Christian perspective, but it seems to be that Giraldus is indicating that the swan, there was a special reverence for the swan in the 12th century. And if it's the case that there was a special reverence for the swan in 12th century Ireland, then it's not entirely unlikely that that reverence goes back a lot further. Crows, wild animals, reptiles are found missing, frogs, etc., etc. And then we go to the second part. Tides. The moon, here we go. Here's something that's quite factual, I think. Great. The moon affects the waters as well as natural humours. Well, there you go. Giraldus knew this in the 12th century. He wasn't far wrong. When the moon is at her meridian, the ocean, recalling its attendant waters to its hidden layers, always leaves the coasts of Britain entirely dry. In the meantime, it fills up the Irish coasts near Dublin with the ebbing tide. So that's true. We get high tide here along the east coast when the moon is at the meridian, or on or close to it. The coast near Waterford follows the flow, not of the Irish tides at Dublin, but of the British tides at Milford. And a thing which is even more to be wondered at, there is a certain rock out in the sea not far from Arklow, from which the tide ebbs on one side, while it flows in on the other. Isn't that amazing? What would that be off Arklow? Is that Tusker Rock, is it? Somebody who lives down that direction might be able to help us. When the moon is recovering her light and is already beginning to grow beyond her half size and becoming big, the western seas, through some secret natural causes, begin to be rough and tempestuous. They swell more and more from day to day, with surging waves running up on the shore in full spate, far beyond their usual limits, until the moon has attained the full perfection of her roundness. Isn't that a lovely description? The moon has attained the full perfection of her roundness. And identified as a she, by the way. And again, Bowen is implicated there. But as her fires decrease and she turns her face away, the swelling of the waves begins to abate until, when she fails altogether, the tide loses its flood and returns once again to its usual channels. And so if you watch the tide charts for the east coast of Ireland, you will see at the time of the full moon, so the high and low tides are like this. And as you wax out towards the full moon, the high tides get higher and the low tides get lower. And then when you go back, they go like that. It's quite fascinating. And indeed, the logboats, the first of the logboat discoveries, which was on Monday a week ago, that was the night of the full moon. So the low tide at that time was particularly low, and the fact that we hadn't had much rain in a while meant that the water levels were perhaps even lower than they would have been. But as our fires decrease, yes, we said that. Indeed, Phoebe is to such an extent a source and influence on all liquids that, according to her waxing and waning, she directs and controls not only the waves of the sea, but also the bone marrow and brains in all living things, as well as the sap of trees and plants. When she is deprived of her full light, you will notice that all things lose their fullness. It's a funny thing, but that bit about the tides doesn't sound like propaganda at all. It's kind of hard to forget. It's easy to forget and hard to remember that we are talking about a Norman propagandist, but in certain things he is just recording observations accurately. When she is deprived of her full light, you'll notice that all things lose their fullness. But when she has attained her complete roundness, you will find that bones are full of marrow, heads of brains, and other things of sap. But it would take a greater work than this to explain the reasons behind such things, and why the western seas have taken for themselves, in some well-ordered and unfailing liveliness, this surging and falling, rather than or more clearly than the eastern seas, and why all these things happen at the direction of the moon, the controller of things liquid. I have, in fact, explained these points clearly and briefly in a poem written in verse called The Flowers of Philosophy. There is a lake in the north of Munster which contains two islands, one rather large and the other rather small. The larger has a church venerated from the earliest times. The smaller has a chapel cared for most devotedly by a few celibates called heaven worshippers or god worshippers. No woman or animal of the female sex could ever enter the larger island without dying immediately. This has been proved many times by instances of dogs and cats and other animals of the female sex. When brought there, often to make a trial, they immediately died. And of course, this is what you call folklore, Chinese whispers, or urban legend. A remarkable thing about the birds there is that while the males settle on the bushes everywhere throughout the island, the females fly over and leave their mates there, and, as if they were fully conscious of its peculiar power, avoid the island like a plague. Well, that's not true. It's certainly not true today. In the smaller island, no one ever died or could die a natural death. Accordingly, it is called the island of the living, etc., etc. Fascinating. I am now going to turn to the most often quoted piece, or two of the most often quoted pieces from Giraldus Cambrensis' History and Topography of Ireland. I did mark them. Can I find them? Yes, I can. And if you give me a moment, I will find them. I definitely will. I haven't lost them. No, I have not. And of course, he has some of the Laura Gowalla there, but we can perhaps return to this. I can't. Oh, here we go. Here we go. Okay. So which one will we do first? Will we talk about the giant's dance at Ishnok, the stone circle, or will we talk about the king's ritual mating with the white mare? Which one will we do first? Let's put it to a public vote. Let me just briefly catch up on comments. I know how presumptive of me to think that there might be even comments that everybody hasn't tuned out at this stage. Fed up listening to rambling. Anthony rambling about Gerald of Wales, Giraldus Cambrensis. Simon Chute of Monumental Ireland is watching. He wants the Giants dance first. Okay, that's fair enough. Giraldus Cambrensis, the medieval equivalent of Fox News. Oh, you'll get them riled up now, Simon. Good evening to you. Michael Naylor and Jeanette are in New Jersey. I hadn't seen them. There are very few viewers on the Mythical Ireland community. Most of you are either on the main page or on YouTube. Desiree says, yeah, and that's a good point. I believe that's why the ancients built so many great monuments, to keep track of the moon and the heavens. Because of the moon's 19-year cycle, there's an opportunity only once or twice every 19 years for extremely dramatic, I presume that's supposed to be tides, and the agent wanted to know what was going to come back again. Well, if you wanted power, as far as I'm concerned, in pre-literate times, that power was in the form of prediction and the form of prediction of heavenly events. If you could do that, I think you would have been very well feared and respected. The clean one, please, says Joan McHugh. Look, I'm just giving it to you as it is, and we may not be able to make further comment. It is interesting, though. So this one's called the Giant's Dance, which was transferred from Ireland to Britain. What he means is stolen or appropriated. And let's call a spade a spade. If you go to the British Museum, you'll find lots of things that aren't British. I could give you an example. The Coiningham find, the two gold bracelets and 2 gold necklaces that were found by a labourer digging at Newgrange in the 1840s that are now in the British Museum. There was in ancient, I didn't mean to be controversial. I'm just saying, let's not go too far down that rabbit hole, because there's a long history there and it's complex. But there's a few things anyway in the British Museum that aren't British, more than a few. There was in ancient times in Ireland a remarkable pile of stones which was called the Giant's Dance, because giants brought it from the farthest limits of Africa to Ireland and erected it, according to some, on a mountain of Kildare. According to others, at Offaila, near the castle of Naas, employing truly remarkable skill and ability. It is amazing how so many great stones were ever brought together or erected in one place. And with what skill upon such great and high stones, others no less great were placed. These latter seem to be hanging, as it were, and suspended in space, so as to rest rather on the skill of the craftsman than on the base of stones beneath. Now, I should say a couple of things there. That first of all, he appears to be describing a henge, a stone henge, of course, because stone circles in Ireland, as they are extant, don't have what we might call the crossbars or the hanging stones. And by the way, that is the origin of the word henge. I listened to a very interesting lecture by Tom Condit of the National Monument Service at Knowth in 2019, speaking about some of the discoveries of 2018 at Brúnabonia. And he told us that henge is derived from hanging stones. And that is where the word derives from. And here we have, in the 12th century, Gerald of Wales describing hanging stones. In a monument that had been brought to Ireland from the furthest reaches of Africa by giants and put at Kildare. We'll talk about Kildare and where we think that might be. That's Simon. I know why Simon is interested. Simon has written about this on Monumental Ireland. And if you're not following Monumental Ireland, get over there right now and give it a follow. According to British history, the King of the Britons, Aurelius Ambrosius, arranged through the divine help of Merlin, the aforementioned, the wizard, that these stones be brought over from Ireland to Britain. He got them put up in exactly the same order and with the same skill as before, so as to leave behind some memorial of a great crime committed when the flower of Britain's manhood was cut to pieces by the concealed daggers of the Saxons, who, coming in the guise of peace with the weapons of treachery, killed the youth and the kingdom that had been so carelessly guarded. And of course, isn't it Geoffrey of Monmouth who says that they were erected as memorial stones to those who had fallen in a great battle? Now, let's just briefly talk about Kildare, because there's a footnote. And the manuscript reads Killarum, K-I-L-L-A-R-A-U-M. And I don't know how you could confuse Killarum with Kildare. But it has been suggested by Simon of Monumental Ireland and many others that in fact he's possibly referring to the castle of Kildare, which is a townland immediately to the west of the hill of Ishnok. K-I-L-L-A-R-E, which sounds much closer to the manuscript's sorry, I've lost the footnote, Killarum, than Kildare. And it has been suggested that perhaps once upon a time there was a giant stone circle near Ishnok, marking the centre of Ireland. Makes a certain amount of sense. We do know from more recent archaeological reconnaissance of Ishnok that there is at least one giant enclosure on the hill, parts of which may have been cut into bare rock. And who knows in the fullness of time what might be discovered. Wouldn't it be fascinating if we discovered that there were the sockets somewhere in the vicinity of Ishnok or Kildare, that there were the sockets of giant stones that had stood there? And that would leave you wondering about all sorts of things. Anyway, they recently found, didn't they, the site of some of the stones of Stonehenge, which they said had actually been moved from a place in Wales. I cannot remember the name of the place in Wales. You'll have to forgive me. The blue stones were said to have come from the Preseli Mountains there. And there are all sorts of suggestions I've seen online about alignments, that if you follow the line from Stonehenge to this site, either the site of the source of the stones at Preseli or the site of the former stone circle, which may have been moved to Stonehenge, that if you follow that in a line, you come to Ishnok. So I've heard. I haven't done much investigation of it myself, I'm ashamed to say, because these are things that I would be very interested in. Anyway, I think there will be a second part to this, because there's certainly more than enough information from Giraldus. Now that we've introduced him, certainly on the mythological material, I think there's definitely another episode. So perhaps we'll come back to Giraldus next week. Who is in the house that I've missed? Robin. Did I miss Robin? Archeo Soup, says Sulky Woman, has some great commentary on ethics in museums. I follow Archeo Soup, and a big fan. Anthony, I'm a Donegal woman. Who's this now? And a native regard. I'd love to take you on a tour of my beloved Donegal. The Neolithic and early Christian history of Donegal will blow your mind. I could nearly promise you that. Anthony, there's a wonderful story of Ireland north of the Boyne and north of the Shannon. Yeah, I'd love that, Mary. And maybe sooner rather than later. I mean, lockdown is ending now, you know. Won Mawn. Is that how it's pronounced? Thank you to Helen and I think it's Robin Rickman. Thank you. Won, is it? Again, Movanwe, I'm terribly sorry for putting you on the spot. John McHugh. I sense a drone visit to Ishnok, Anthony. Yeah, well, there are people down there with drones. I know that not Marty. Marty, I don't think Marty Mulligan has a drone. Not yet, anyway. But Justin Moffat, and hello to Marty and Justin, who we saw participating in the wonderful lighting of the Bealtaine fire last week at Ishnok. Both of them were involved, which was lovely to see. Both good friends of mine. And Justin, I know, has a drone and has been flying over many parts of the Midlands. So I await with bated breath to hear of some things that he might have discovered. And the other bit that I wanted to read tonight, and this is the most oft-quoted passage from Giraldus Cambrensis' History and Topography of Ireland. And this is about a new and outlandish way of confirming kingship and dominion. By the way, Simon Chute, if I got anything wrong there in that, Marty has had two of them. Oh, there you go. I didn't know that. But Simon, if I've made any mistakes in what I was saying about Kildare, please do correct me. There are some things which, if the exigencies of my account did not demand it, shame would discountenance their being described. But the austere discipline of history spares neither truth nor modesty. And so the following, kind of comes with a health warning. If this was on television, you'd have an announcer saying, the following description may disturb some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. So if you are thinking of boiling the kettle and making a cup of tea, perhaps this is the moment to do it. I'm going to give it to you as it is, and then we'll have a little bit of commentary. There is in the northern and farther part of Ulster, namely in Kenale Cunnel, a certain people which is accustomed to appoint its king with a right altogether outlandish and abominable. So here he's recording the history, but he's also commenting on it as well. When the whole people of that land has been gathered together in one place, a white mare is brought forward into the middle of the assembly. He who is to be inaugurated, not as a chief, but as a beast, not as a king, but as an outlaw, has bestial intercourse with her before all, professing himself to be a beast also. The mare is then killed immediately, cut up in pieces, and boiled in water. A bath is prepared for the man afterwards in the same water. He sits in the bath, surrounded by all his people, and all, he and they, eat of the meat of the mare which is brought to them. He quaffs and drinks of the broth in which he is bathed, not in any cup or using his hand, but just dipping his mouth into it round about him. When this unrighteous rite has been carried out, his kingship and dominion have been confirmed. And there have been many, many discussions and arguments over the years about the veracity of that account, whether it was a truthful account or whether it had been embellished or exaggerated. And some historians have pointed out, and those writing about mythology, that in fact such similar rites are fairly widely attested. In fact, it is fascinating from my point of view that, as you might have read in my Mythical Ireland book, which I don't immediately have to hand, do I? I do. I have a chapter in Mythical Ireland dealing with the old Irish names for the Milky Way. And one of those is Audible na Lárach Báine, the tale of the white mare. The Lár Bán, or the Lár Bháin, is considered by some to be an ancient sovereignty goddess. Fascinatingly, Ronald Hicks, a good friend of Mythical Ireland, we should have Ronald on as a conversation guest. He would be brilliant. There you go. I'm going to try and organise that. He says that in Irish tradition, quote, the moon was referred to as An Lár Bháin, the white mare, unquote. This idea is similar in some respects to the idea of the moon as a white cow, Bóinne. On one old Samhain custom in Ireland involved the procession of the Lár Bháin, the white mare, from house to house. People would blow on cows' horns, and the party was headed by a person dressed in a white robe or sheet who was known as the white mare. And then I go on about this infamous account of the bizarre inauguration rite of the Kenale Cunnel, the northern sept of the Iníl dynasty in Donegal. And I talk about, I mentioned it anyway. The account was given by a 12th century Welsh scholar, this is my writing, Giraldus Cambrensis, whose writings about Ireland have been described as a hatchet job. And that's not my quote. Who said that? I'll find out momentarily. Nonetheless, the ritual has echoes in the Hindu Asva Meda, the horse sacrifice, and is worth recounting in summarized form. And there I summarized it, etc. And of course, interesting with regard to the idea of the white mare being, let's say, dismembered, cut up, is the fact that Boin, the goddess, is dismembered as she forms the Boin. And I wonder, because Balach na Bo Finne, the way of the white cow, is another name for the Irish Milky Way, I've often suggested that the Boyne River and the Milky Way were seen as reflections of each other, heaven's mirror, as above, so below sort of stuff. And in the cosmological worldview of the people of ancient times, I'm not exactly sure when, that perhaps the river of the sky and the river of the ground have similar sort of creation myths around them. And the story of Bowen is a creation myth, and the story of the Mata, the destruction of the great monster, is a myth. But the idea that the Milky Way is the trail or the tale or the trail, it can be translated both ways, of the white mare is fascinating. In other words, as she was dismembered, her trail was left across the sky. And here we have an ancient kingship rite. Now it's disgusting by modern modern comparisons, by modern standards. It seems to be a totally savage and disgusting thing to do. And perhaps for a moment we have a little bit of sympathy with Cambrensis. And we understand why it is that so many people have said that he was a propagandist rather than a historian. But perhaps he was recording accurately a tradition of the time. I mean, it sounds really, really nasty. But don't forget that in relation to the inauguration of kings, another rite was the Tarabfesh, the bull feast. And a similar thing, that a prime bull was taken into the assembly before the man, all of the rulers in certainly in medieval times were kings, was taken into the assembly and slaughtered and dismembered. And that the druids or the seers, the soothsayers, the priests, whatever you want to call them, ate some of the bull flesh and slept in a particular way. And these are the things that are mentioned briefly in relation to Finn McCool, who was maintained to have chewed on his thumb to gain imbus forosne and the other talents that he got from eating the salmon of knowledge. But that whatever they dreamed of having eaten or consumed part of the bull flesh was to be recorded very carefully, because that then revealed something of who the next king was to be. Sometimes it involved the soothsayer or the druid taking the skin of the bull and wrapping it around him as a blanket and sleeping in it. And the story is told of the king Conor Mór, that Connery was out hunting birds in Dublin Bay and was having so much fun that he stripped naked. And the one who had consumed the bull flesh at Tara after the Tarabfesh, the bull feast, had seen a naked man coming down one of the roads to Tara, carrying a slingshot in one arm and some birds in the other. And that is exactly how Connery, or Conora, if you want, Conor Mór, arrived to Tara. And the priests and the druids were kind of saying, "Look, lads, this fella looks like he's the candidate for kingship." And they all met and discussed the situation. I said, "No, this guy is far too young. He's only a young fella. He's only a whippersnapper, as we say in Ireland. He's only a Wayne. And he's far too young to hold the kingship." But in fact, they stood true to the time-honoured traditions of the rite. And Conor was inaugurated. And indeed, according to the traditions anyway, which are, let's face it, mostly mythological, but may have some basis in historical truth, Conor Mór went on to have a very lengthy and a very fruitful reign, one which ended in disaster with Tugal Brunne da Jarga, which we encountered in many 4 hilarious episodes last year in 2020. So there are definitely aspects of this story which appear to resonate with other things that we've heard from the mythological history of Ireland, and especially in relation to the inauguration of kings. So perhaps Bowen, we could speculate, represents an early divinity who was seen as a sort of a sovereignty goddess. And perhaps the kings who might have been inaugurated, for instance, at Brunabónia in the far distant, long-off days of the Neolithic, were involved in some sort of a rite involving the slaughter of a white cow. And remember that the mata's bits were thrown piece by piece into the water. And that mata is a root word that would appear to be related to máthar, mother. And there's all sorts of connotations there. You'll meet some of that in Return to Segish, although Return to Segish is ostensibly fictional. Some of it is based on myth. A lot of it's based on myth, and some of it's factual. But I think it's fascinating. So I wouldn't say that Cambrensis was making this account up, not at all. I'd say that it's largely truthful, although it may be exaggerated in some of its details, But there you go. Like, we don't know what happened in the past, and what was considered to be normal and what was considered to be righteous and unrighteous and all that. Giraldus, of course, has his own slant on things because, again, he comes from a different tradition in a different country, and he's looking at it as an outsider, and he thinks it's bizarre. And maybe it's a throwback to pre-Christian, prehistoric times when such things might have been normal. Who knows? Who knows? Who can say? Remember that, as I said early in the episode, that although he causes revulsion in some quarters, Giraldus does give us an insight into 12th century Ireland that perhaps we cannot glean from other manuscripts. Albeit, always, with everything that you read in the manuscripts, no matter whether it's written by Giraldus or whether it's written by a monk or who has written it, that the accounts are nearly always tainted to some extent. There's a tiny gap in the clouds. I can see a little bit of blue sky here at last. So I think I'll close off on that, and I think we'll come back to Giraldus next week. And what I'll do between now and next week is I'll highlight all the sections dealing with sort of mythological characters. And also St. Bridget, Simon reminded me that he also wrote about St. Bridget, and we'll come back to it next week and talk more about Giraldus Cambrensis, Gerald of Wales. Yes, Catherine makes a very good point. And perhaps I won't read it out. Perhaps I'll let you read it for yourselves. Surprised at everyone being shocked by them killing and eating the horse. But nobody been mentioned at the earlier aspect of the story. Yes, the bestial coming together of man and horse. Yeah, strange one, I know. M. Cloak. I didn't see you there, M. Cloak. Fascinating video. I'm a second-year history and anthropology student at Maynooth University. One assignment I was given was to compare the Topography of Ireland to the Book of McGovern. I'm not familiar with the Book of McGovern. So perhaps that's something for a future episode for myself, but I hope that is interesting. And I wonder what the comparisons yielded. Was Cambrensis way off, or is there more truth to it than the Irish would like to admit? And I'm only just putting that out as a possibility. Grace Walker, thank you for the class. I thoroughly enjoy it. This is what I love doing, Grace, and it makes it all the better that there are people to enjoy watching and listening, and especially the interactions. The interactions really make it. David Cameron says, Maggie, no. Let's not get political. This is a non-political show. Let's not go down that road. I think I went too far when I talked about the British Museum. Do you think there's also a connection to Macha as the mayor? Yeah, that's an interesting one, Michael, and that's maybe one I'll come back to as well. Haven't done an episode on Macha yet, and it's one that has been suggested by a few people. So I think that's one we will definitely have to return to. Lar Herbert is there. I hadn't seen you earlier, Lar. Good evening to you. Hope you enjoyed this evening's live stream. But thanks everybody for coming along. I had great fun, as I always do. Don't forget, you can tune in afterwards if you missed any of it. You can tune in on Facebook or on YouTube. If you're on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and subscribe. That helps me and it helps grow the channel. Don't forget to also, if you want to make a contribution towards the running of the show, I suggest a $5, if you can spare it, paypal.me/Mythical Ireland, or become a patron over at patreon.com/Mythical Ireland. That's all I have for tonight. Don't forget, I hope that a lot of you at this stage, especially our vulnerable people, are vaccinated, and that you're not anti-vax. If you are, I don't want to know, because I'll be getting it as soon as I can. But don't forget to keep sanitizing your hands and doing all the things that you have been doing to keep yourself safe from the pandemic. And look, there's a bit of hope in the air at the moment. And it started last week with that lovely bright fire at twilight on the hill of Ishnock. And, our lockdown has been eased quite considerably today here in Ireland after a very, very considerable length of time. So we're hoping for better and brighter days ahead. In the meantime, all the very best to you. Good night. Colo sov if you're going to bed. Sound sleep. Ichowa. Slán the foal. Bye for now. And the most important one of all, Toga Bugay. Pardon me. Take it easy. We'll see you sooner rather than later, hopefully. Thanks a million for tuning in. This has been Live Irish Myths, episode number 145. I'm Anthony Murphy, and I'm going to read some of the books in my library.